Mr. Speaker, this is a historic night. Historic in many ways, I suppose. But I was fortunate enough to spend half an hour with Speaker Chop earlier tonight, and even more fortunate to spend a session, a very eventful session, as the minority leader with a person who has made an immense amount of history in our state. I'm so glad that his family is here, because I know that family is a critical component for Speaker Chop. We've talked about that. He's told me about his childhood, the son of immigrants, someone who grew up in a family that works hard. I think one of the things that I appreciate about the Speaker is something that we have in common. We grew up around people that worked hard, still know how to work, and have an immense amount of reverence for everyone among us who value work, who value families, and also have a place in their heart for those who are less fortunate, maybe those that don't have a community and don't have a family. And one thing that is, I think, very unique about Frank, if I can call you that, is that not only does he value those things, but he's spent his entire life, whether it was here in the chamber or his life in the community, in trying to provide those things, family and community, for those who had no other way of providing those for themselves. One of my oldest friends, former Representative and Senator Mark Domet, served with Frank from the very beginning. I think Frank was elected to the House 2 years before Senator Domet, and I called up Mark on my way here today and asked him if he could share a few stories. I'm not sure I can share any of those. But he asked me to remember what he thought was Frank's most lasting achievement, and that is the idea of One Washington. It's one of those achievements that both sides offer. You hear us talking about on this side One Washington all the time. Mark asked me to be sure to mention Representative Bill Grant, who was instrumental in helping people understand that Washington is the Puget Sound area, the rest of Western Washington, and all of Eastern Washington as well, and said that that was a wonderful friendship, and he wanted me to be sure to remember Bill Grant and the partnership that he and Frank had. I've mentioned to a few of you that Frank came out to my home on the farm when I first became minority leader. I don't think a lot of people would have done that. He just called up, asked if he could do that, and spent just about a whole day with my family. They were deeply honored to have someone as accomplished, as prominent, and historic as Frank. We had lunch together, and that's where I found out just how much we have in common as families, and an amazing amount of moral and personal convictions in common. I had a great experience with Frank. Oh, I also forgot to include one little piece of advice that Frank shared with me. He shared a lot of advice, actually, but he did say something about the fact that he had a great experience at Toastmasters. And he suggested that maybe Toastmasters would be good for me. And I can see from some of his experiences out here on the floor that it was a remarkable thing for him. I had fun with Frank, probably one of the first conversations that I had with him at the Burke Museum dedication a few years ago. And he gave kind of a surprising speech. He got up there and was very eloquent, kind of a stem winder, actually. And all he talked about was the taxpayers. And I was cheering him on. And he came down, and we had a little nod of other lawmakers there, and said, "That one was for you, Wilcox." So thanks for that, Frank. It's going to be strange having you here as a regular member. And I hope that you do that for a long time. We're already thinking of some, I think, really valuable ideas that we could collaborate with you on. You know, there are some license plates that haven't been proposed yet. We thought that you might enjoy some cozy meetings with reporters and maybe even some press conferences. And, you know, we don't have a state reptile yet. So now that you've kind of broken the ice with passing bills, I bet we would support you on quite a few of those. You know, this is also a state that has become fairly well known for the reintroduction of formerly native species. And so we thought that if you came back and sat with Representative Kretz, maybe he could reintroduce you to the chamber here as a regular member. Now, there is another suggestion, and that would be that you replace me as being the person that sits next to Richard DeBolt, and he could be your mentor. Well, I also have a little bit of advice for the next speaker. I don't know who that's going to be. It's going to be, honestly, hard to follow Frank. And so I've got another piece of advice for that speaker. For God's sakes, don't put him next to Richard. In all seriousness, I've said it before many times, and I'll say it again. Frank, I and every member of this caucus admire you. You're a piece of history. We have two real political epochs here in Washington, and they were dominated by first Governor Evans and later by Speaker frank-chopp. It will be many years before anybody can hope to match that. Your contributions to the institution and the state will be felt for generations by people on every corner of the state. Frank, on behalf of our caucus now and the caucuses from the past, thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Further remarks?